Rebirth of a Movie Star. Author, J11, 22, 33. Chapter 16 to 20. Chapter 16. Kyuzayohai saw this middle-aged woman and his first instinct was to hide behind Bai Lang. His small heart tightly grasped Bai Lang's pants. Bai Lang hesitated, then smiled at the woman. "Hello, you are." The middle-aged woman's smile got bigger. "Oh, I'm Mr. Qiuyu's hired nanny. My name is Yang Li. Xiaohai calls me Auntie Yang." After speaking, she smiled at Xiaohai, but Kyuzayohai only hit further. "Although Mr. Qiyu has mentioned to me that in these couple of days Xiaohai will be staying at your place, but seeing that Mr. Bai is a busy man, I thought that you would definitely encounter troubles taking care of such a small child. That's why I thought it's better if I come to help." Seeing Bai Lang's raised eyebrow and that he was about to open his mouth to reject her, Yang Li laughed and continued speaking. "I know, Mr. Bai, that you're good-hearted and willing to take care of Xiaohai. However, it took me over half a year to familiarize myself with Xiaohai's eating and dressing routine. Usually Mr. Qiyu isn't home very often and isn't aware of how picky Xiaohai is when eating. He also has a stubborn personality. If the person who takes care of him changes, he definitely won't be used to it. It might affect his studies." At this time, Yang Li smiled in a benevolent way at Xiaohai. Right now Xiaohai just wants to experience new things. "I'm thinking it's better if Xiaohai comes home after school. It's more comfortable. Then when he has holidays he can live at Mr. Bai's for a few days. That way everyone can be more comfortable, right? And since I'm still receiving Mr. Qiyu's salary, it won't make me feel so guilty." Yang Li's manner of speaking was very rational and logical. Combined with her elegant dress and friendly smile, she didn't look like a nanny but more like a well-raised woman from a wealthy family. She was even wearing a large round pearl on her hand. She made Bai Lang feel very much as though everything she arranged was very good. But at this time Kyuzayohai began to panic. He tugged Bai Lang's pants and stammered, I don't want to go home. Daddy said I can live at your place. I can eat anything. I don't want little rabbit steam buns anymore. I want to live with you." Bai Lang smiled and patted Kyuzayohai's head. He said to Yang Li, "Auntie Yang is very meticulous. I am also scared that I can't take care of Xiaohai as well. However, Mr. Qiyu already promised Xiaohai, so I can't let Mr. Qiyu break his promise. So if Xiaohai wants to stay with me he can. If he really can't get used to it and wants to go home, then I'll take him home immediately. There's no problem." Kyuzayohai immediately hugged Bai Lang's leg tightly. "I won't. I'll be good." Bai Lang only kept patting Kyuzayohai's head, reassuring Xiaohai's restless mood. Yang Li gave Kyuzayohai an adoring gaze that also carried some feelings of blame. "Oh, Mr. Bai really knows how to make himself liked. Thinking about back then, it took me a lot of effort to get close with Xiaohai." As for whether there was a hidden meaning behind these words, Bai Lang didn't want to think too deeply. He only smiled. "Sorry to make Auntie Yang come all this way for nothing. When Mr. Qiyu comes back, I will definitely tell him about Auntie Yang's kindness." Yang Li sighed. "I just feel bad for Xiaohai since he doesn't have a mother. What a pitiful child." Bai Lang didn't say anything. However, the smile on his face faded slightly. He could somewhat understand why Xiaohai didn't like Auntie Yang. "Since it's like this, then Xiaohai, you can go with Mr. Bai." At this time Yang Li lifted up a cloth-covered bag. Inside was a stainless steel soup box. This is the healing medicinal soup that Dr. Chen has prescribed these days. It's to help nurture Xiaohai's body. This child is often ill and Mr. Qiyu is often very worried. This type of medication needs to take in over the long term to have a good effect. If it's stopped in the middle it won't be good. I have prepared 3 days' worth for Mr. Bai to take home. After dinner, can I trouble Mr. Bai to remember to give Xiaohai a bowl?" Bai Lang remembered the soup that Kyuzayohai had mentioned the other night. So he took it and said, "Thank you, Auntie Yang. You've worked hard." Kyuzayohai stared at the soup. He wanted to protest but then remembered the promise he just made. He straightened his back but in the end continued to bury his face against Bai Lang's leg. After Bai Lang took the soup, Yang Li added a few more instructions about how after drinking the soup, Xiaohai might start to feel tired. Then looked at Xiaohai and said in a lingering tone, "Xiaohai, you must obediently listen to everything Mr. Bai tells you, okay? Don't make trouble for Mr. Bai." Kyuzayohai hugged Bai Lang's thigh and agreed. Bai Lang saw the situation, then reached out and picked up Kyuzayohai. "Okay, we had better go. So goodbye to Auntie Yang." Kyuzayohai was evidently caught off guard by this motion. This was the first time Bai Lang had hugged him. However, he used the opportunity to stick closer to Bai Lang. He said obediently, "By Auntie Yang." Bai Lang made a simple goodbye to Yang Li. He didn't say much and took Kyuzayo-hai in the direction of the car. After getting in the car, Bai Lang helped the Kyuzayo-hai sit properly and buckled on his seat belt. Kyuzayo-hai's quiet and obedience during this time made the driver Hong Hong turn around several times to look. The usually boisterous and noisy child was being very quiet. Bai Lang knew that it was because he was still feeling insecure. So he said in a gentle voice, "Later on, let's go buy some Little Rabbit steamed buns." Kyuzayo-hai shook his head. "I don't need it." Bai Lang rubbed his downcast head. "Don't worry. Whatever you want, just let me know. If you're bad, then I'll smack you. But I won't send you back." Kyuzayo-hai opened his eyes wide. There was color on his face again. He said in a small voice, "Really?" "Yes. And if my smacks don't hurt, then there's still Hong Hong." Bai Lang decided to drag someone with him under the water. Hong Hong silently looked in the rear-view mirror. Kyuzayo-hai brightened up. He nodded his head vigorously. Then he remembered something wasn't right. "But I'm really very good. The Little Rabbit steamed buns is something Daddy said, not me." Bai Lang laughed and said, "Yes, I know." That night, after eating dinner, Kyuzayo-hai screwed up his face to drink the soup. Bai Lang had put aside a steamed bun with red bean filling which he intended to give to Shia-hai to suppress the bitter taste. Because of this, Bai Lang had specifically gone on the internet to check which food could be eaten with medicine. He didn't want to ruin the effect of the medication. However, what he didn't expect that within a few minutes of Kyuzayo-hai drinking the soup down in one gulp, he was already closing his eyes and nodding away. The steamed bun he had prepared thus didn't get eaten. The speed of the effect of the medicinal soup really shocked Bai Lang. He hurried to help Kyuzayo-hai change into his pajamas and put him into bed. During the quiet of the evening, Bai Lang looked over the script again. He even picked the movie and used the method that Ju Quan had taught him to carefully study it. After some time, Bai Lang thought about the fact that Kyuzayo-hai had gone to sleep at 6 to 7 p.m. He might wake up at 1 to 2 a.m. in the morning from oversleep. But when Bai Lang came in to check, Kyuzayo-hai was still sleeping deeply under the blanket. He didn't even look as though he changed his position. Bai Lang glanced over him one last time, thinking about the fact that tomorrow he should help Shia-hai take a bath before having dinner, and they also had to hurry to brush his teeth afterwards. However, the next day there was a cruel reality waiting for Bai Lang. Kyuzayo-hai had wet the bed. Bai Lang cleaned up the wet bed sheets and blankets with a big head. He thought that Auntie Yang wasn't wrong when he said taking care of Kyuzayo-hai would be troublesome. He had never raised the child, so he could only slowly get accustomed to it. Kyuzayo-hai was at this moment pouting and standing to one side, naked from the waist down. He looked downcast and said he had forgotten to wear his white pants. Auntie Yang would help him wear it. Once he wore it, then he wouldn't pee on the bed. After speaking, he ran over the bag that Hong Hong had brought over for him and took the white pants out. It was a nappy. He gave it to Bai Lang with a worried face. Whether or not it was normal for a 5-year-old child to pee the bed, Bai Lang wasn't sure since he hadn't researched it. However, he still felt something was not quite right. Bai Lang took the nappy and said, "Do you wear these white pants to bed every night?" However, the night that Kyuchi-en had been here, Kyuzayo-hai hadn't wet the bed. Kyuzayo-hai nodded his head, then shook it again. "I didn't need it before. It's only recently." He stamped his feet. "Auntie Yang said it's because I drank too much soup and it's not a big deal." You don't tell Daddy, okay?" "The soup again?" Bai Lang raised his eyebrow. At this time the phone rang. Bai Lang picked up. It was Kyuchi-en calling from overseas. Bai Lang answered a few of his questions about Kyuzayo-hai's circumstances, however didn't tell him about the bedwetting incident. The reason was because Kyuzayo-hai stared up at Bai Lang with pitiful eyes. Thus Bai Lang gave the phone over to Kyuzayo-hai and told him to talk to Kyuchi-en himself. Kyuzayo-hai was surprised and happy. He jumped up and down with a naked butt and told his daddy that he was being a good boy. Bai Lang laughed helplessly. He glanced at him and thought about the fact that they still needed to take a shower, change their clothes, and that they would definitely be late for school. He snatched back the phone and firmly hung up on Kyuchi-en, then began a busy morning rather like a war zone. After successfully sending Kyuzayo-hai to school, Bai Lang returned home and found a cleaning company to help him get rid of the wet blankets and bedsheets. He also had someone treat the mattress. After he finished, Bai Lang sat at his computer and researched 5 years old and bedwetting and read the related articles. He read a bunch of child-rearing articles on the bed and found out that Kyuzayo-hai's circumstances can be said to be within the realm of normal. He felt reassured and closed the computer and wanted to lie down on the sofa for a nap. Since he had a break, then he would have a rest. It's just that sleeping in the daytime made one prone to bad dreams. Thus Bai Lang's sleep was very restless. He kept dreaming about what had happened before he died. When Qiu Qian had been by his side, Bai Lang was so exhausted he slept soundly. Thus he hadn't had this dream in some time. This time when seeing those scenes again, his heart didn't feel as despairing and regretful as previously. He had already thought through a lot of things. Since he had a chance at rebirth, Bai Lang felt he was lucky. This time, Bai Lang saw again the things that happened after he fainted away. The face of Qiu Qian, who was trying desperately to help him, had a kind of hard and unyielding quality. Compared with the Qiu Qian who Bai Lang knew now, there was still some differences. However, this wasn't surprising. These few years would be the years that Qiu Qian would get involved in the major businesses of his family enterprises, so he probably changed and grew a lot during this time. As the scenes in front of him changed, Bai Lang saw Qiu Qian call an ambulance for him and send him to the hospital. He saw him pacing in front of the surgery. As he walked, Qiu Jin's footsteps turned and actually went to a different level. It was the first time Bai Lang had seen this scene in his dream. He thought it was probably a coincidence. Qiu Qian probably had some other friend who was staying in the hospital at this time. However, as Bai Lang followed Qiu Qian into a special VIP room, he saw Qiu Jin's grave face as well as the small head that was half showing on the bed. Bai Lang started. He was so shocked he actually woke up. He half raised his body from the sofa and he was sweating. His heart was beating very fast. It was a young boy. Bai Lang was sure. He looked like a young teenager. It was just the right age for Qiu Ziohai in 10 years. In his past life, Qiu Qian had hidden Qiu Ziohai very deep. He never let him appear in front of people. This was different to the behavior that Bai Lang had seen these days with Qiu Qian chasing behind Qiu Ziohai. The difference was because something had happened to Qiu Ziohai to make Qiu Qian hide him like that? Bai Lang swallowed slowly. A possibility was arising in his heart. After a few minutes, he placed some of the soup from the soup box into a takeaway cup before going out. 3 days later, Bai Lang made a long-distance call to Qiu Qian. After Qiu Qian heard what he had to say, he immediately arranged a flight back to China that night. Chapter 17. After more than 10 hours travel, by the time Qiu Qian rushed back to Bai Lang's apartment, it was already past 3 a.m. Qiu Qian had been suppressing a furious anger the entire trip. As soon as he came in, he crept into Qiu Ziohai's room. He desperately needed to take a look at his son first. However, he didn't expect that the bed was completely empty. Qiu Qian paused and then immediately changed directions to the main bedroom. He wasn't wrong. In the main bedroom's large, deep blue bed he found one big person and one small person. Bai Lang was sleeping on his side with a small frown. Behind him, Qiu Ziohai was sleeping like an octopus on his stomach as though he was very tired. His small face was tightly pressed against Bai Lang's back, completely squashed against him, and he was even drooling onto Bai Lang's back. This image was completely like he had taken Bai Lang for a large-scale hugging pillow. It was only the size wasn't right, so Qiu Ziohai couldn't get his leg completely over. But even so, the two people were both breathing very peacefully, sleeping very soundly. Underneath the moonlight, Qiu Qian saw this peaceful image. The anger and panic in his heart faded slightly. As for the investigation and getting to the bottom of things, it seemed to be not as important as letting these two have a good rest. Qiu Qian couldn't help himself reaching out and feeling Qiu Ziohai's head. Then he also touched Bai Lang this time. It was his mistake. He owed the two of them. He owed Xiaohai, and also towards Bai Lang. Qiu Qian lowered his eyes. Something in his heart couldn't help loosening. Then he also lay down beside these two people. Tomorrow. He would begin tomorrow. He would make them pay with everything they had. The next day, Bai Lang was woken up by the feeling of pressure. He was being squashed by two people, one big, one small, one on top and one on the bottom. But with his small movement, the big one immediately woke up. Bai Lang squinted his eyes and turned with difficulty. Then his breath was stolen away by a smoky and heavy kiss. Bai Lang didn't push him away. He closed his eyes and returned the kiss. These days he had been made restless by his dreams from his previous life. When he thought about the scene from his dream and compared it with the lively and cute Qiu Ziohai before his eyes, the cruelty and malevolence of the person hidden behind the scenes really made Bai Lang feel cold all the way into his heart. Thinking about Yang Li's smile in front of the kindergarten as she had handed the soup over and the specificity of her instructions, it was enough to make him sure that she had known the significance of the medicine. It wasn't just that she was trying to find a way to make her job easier. It should be known that placing serious sleeping tablets into soup, when used over a long time, can stunt a child's development. It was a chronic type of developmental disorder, The symptoms were very slow, and by the time it was detected, it would have already left irreparable damage. The cause also would not be found easily. Although Bai Lang didn't know her reasons, to do something so cruel to such a small child was really outside the realm of Bai Lang's experience in his past life. So when he felt Qiu Jin's familiar scent, Bai Lang's heart relaxed. He didn't mind tickling closer. As the kiss went on, Qiu Jin's aggression also seemed to lessen. The heat became comfortable and soothing. Bai Lang felt his whole body going soft. At this time Qiu Ziohai's sleepy voice sounded. "Daddy, why are you biting each other?" Bai Lang realized that one could also choke during a kiss. Qiu Qian arranged for Qiu Ziohai to have a secret full-body examination in a private clinic. The results of the tests were good. Perhaps because Yang Li was scared in the beginning of being found out, so the dosage seemed to be on the lower end. All of Qiu Ziohai's developmental parameters were within normal ranges. However, he still had drunk the soup for some time, so no one could predict exactly if there was any permanent damage. It could only be determined after 3 years of follow-up testing. When the doctor told them this, Qiu Jin's face sunk. It became just as what Bai Lang had seen in his previous life. As for the investigation regarding Yang Li, Bai Lang didn't know the details. After Hong Hong took away all of the soup that Yang Li had made, Qiu Qian never again spoke of this person in front of Bai Lang and Qiu Ziohai. Qiu Qian only told Qiu Ziohai one evening that Auntie Yang had gone back to her hometown and probably wouldn't be coming back. Qiu Ziohai opened his eyes wide. He happily asked if this meant he didn't need to go home. Could he continuing living here forever? Qiu Qian also didn't look at Bai Lang. He pressed his son's head and said, "Okay, in the future you can live here." Bai Lang logically interpreted this as, after what had happened to Yang Li, it was difficult for Qiu Qian in the short term to trust another nanny. He also didn't want life apart from Qiu Ziohai anymore. Hence, prior to him finding some new to settle him, it was reasonable for them to stay here for the time being. When Qiu Ziohai heard this, he was so happy he rolled around on Qiu Jin's belly. Qiu Qian hugged his son and didn't push him away. Everyone was like this. Only after almost losing your treasure would you learn its value and importance. Bai Lang watched from one side. He only hoped that Qiu Qian had had this lesson and that the scene from his dream would never occur. However, on the other side of Qiu Jin's warmth was another face that shocked Bai Lang. A few days later in the evening news it was broadcasted. Madam Yang has jumped from a building and is suspected suicide. Bai Lang immediately changed the channel and didn't look at it again. At that time Qiu Ziohai was holding a little rabbit steamed bun and munching on it. He was smiling as he said he wanted to save one to give to Azan tomorrow. Azan really liked his steamed buns. Qiu Qian, who was sitting to one side, looked at Bai Lang. He suddenly spoke. He said the old seafarers were all superstitious. It was their belief that if children with mental retardation were the result of curses, so thus a cursed person needed to be kicked out of the house and sent far away. Otherwise they may cause danger around them. When Qiu Qian said this, his eyes were very cold. However, Bai Lang felt surprised. He didn't think Qiu Qian would reveal anything to him. After all, in these few words, it was enough to reveal the people behind Yang Li. It was most likely the people inside the Qiu family. Tian. I think Qiu family originally started out as dock boat workers generations ago. That's why their main industry is shipping, and they still have old belief superstitions. Combined with Qiu Jin's dangerous expression and his dark and threatening aura, it was clear he had not managed to completely eradicate the nest. Bai Lang couldn't help but sink into silence. He thought about the cruel and ruthless methods of the Qiu Qian 10 years later. Perhaps it was because of these type of events happening time and time again, all the way until Qiu Ziohai came over and said, "What's a curse? Can it be eaten?" The heavy atmosphere lightened. Qiu Qian sighed and expressed that he thought his son was really a pig. He only knew how to sleep and eat. After being scared by this shadowy incident, Bai Lang didn't have much free time left. Fang Hua's homework for Bai Lang had been delayed by him for many days. He had no choice but to get onto it. Thus he made an appointment, and then Bai Lang, who was also a nanny, took Qiu Ziohai with him to visit the Regal Suit. When it came to the Regal Suit, actually it wasn't a custom suit shop that had been established since the olden days. However, everyone in the industry knew that the head tailor's skill could be traced back to the previous dynasty. The knowledge and expertise had been passed down from the time, but it was recently that the brothers Li Fu and Li Hua had established the brand the Regal Suit. Right now the fame of their brand could be considered no one or no two in the industry. The older brother Li Fu had inherited most of the tailoring skill. The younger brother Li Hua was mostly in charge of the running of the business. Li Hua had also helped his mother Li Fu find a group of skilled disciples to study and work under him. In the industrial era of garment making, there were a lot of outside markets, and he successfully managed to increase the output and brought in the audience of his brand. So other than the master Li Fu, there were 12 personal disciples. Right now all of them could be considered very experienced and talented suit makers, and there was even a third generation of pupils. Using his business acumen, Li Hua successfully managed to keep all of these younger generations within the regal suit and didn't let any of them slip away. So the regal suit was often used as an example of not only the highest quality suit making skill, but also of a very successful family business. This time the teacher that Fang Hua had arranged for Bai Lang was none other than Master Li Fu. If people in the industry knew about this, they would definitely wag their tongues. After all, the suits that Li Fu made personally now cost into the 6 digits. If this great master appeared, then Bai Lang might even be able to directly change careers. BL might learn so much from him that he can change to become a suit maker. Lol. However, the reason that Li Fu accepted to tutor him was because the regal suit can be said to be the professional advisor for the movie Outside Gold and Jade. The details regarding custom suit making were all provided by the regal suit, and this was something that the highly intelligent Li Hua had arranged. Since they had agreed to be the professional advisor, then Li Hua was also very dedicated and sincere. Thus he directly pushed out his older brother to help. This decision led Fang Hua to be slightly surprised. She had to inform him in an embarrassed manner that she had told Bai Lang to also go and get some custom suits made at the same time. But it was not necessary for Master Li Fu to do these personally. When he heard this, Li Hua laughed exuberantly. He expressed that the regal suit could handle this kind of small expense, so thus Bai Lang came unexpectedly to win this fortune. However, it was not until Bai Lang reached the regal suit that he got this good news. The regal suit was located in an elite area of a city. The setup inside the shop was also very different to a ready-to-wear shop. The deep-colored wooden furniture and soft lighting were very refined, and made the fabric displayed on one side look even more elegant and exquisite. However, in the shop there was not one set of finished suit for show. The entire shop, other than the front counter and the velvet sofa in front of the counter, was occupied by independent and separated studios. This was to make it more convenient for each VIP to privately discuss their requirements, have their measurements taken by the tailors, and to try on their creations. Thus the very large shop was extremely quiet. The shop was run on appointment only, so other than the receptionist sitting at the front desk, there wasn't anyone else that could be senator this day. When Bai Lang held Qiu Zhaohai's hand and took him inside, he couldn't help but hold his finger in front of his mouth and remind Xiaohai to SHH. Qiu Zhaohai obediently nodded his head and used the same gesture to mimic back to Bai Lang. SHH? The girl sitting at the front desk smiled in a friendly manner. Mr. Bai, welcome to the regal suit. There's still a few minutes until your appointment time. Right now the master's previous client still hasn't left. I'm so sorry to ask you to wait on the sofa for a little while. Bai Lang politely returned the smile. Thank you? I'm the one who should be apologizing for the delay in coming. It was really because of some family matters, and so also today I couldn't help but bring this child along. I don't know if the master will mind. The receptionist smiled happily. Don't worry, the master really likes young children. This little brother is obedient and pretty. The master will be very happy. Qiu Zhaohai nodded his head. He used a very small voice to say, I'm really very good. The receptionist laughed out loud. Big sister knows. That's why good children will have biscuits to eat. Later on big sister will get one for you. Qiu Zhaohai opened eagerly and looked at Bai Lang, waiting for his permission. In these last few days Qiu Zhaohai had been well managed by Bai Lang as to what he could eat. Bai Lang patted Qiu Zhaohai's head. Thank big sister. Thank you big sister, Qiu Zhaohai said enthusiastically. The receptionist took these two to the sofa to sit down. Then she poured a pot of red tea and brought over a plate of soft egg tarts. The exquisiteness of it would not have lost to an afternoon tea shop. After a few minutes more passed, the receptionist came to apologize again. It seemed that the previous client needed a little bit more time. Bai Lang smiled and said he didn't mind. He said he also wasn't scared of eating a few more egg tarts since the suit was custom made. These words made the receptionist giggle, so she brought over a plate of even more desserts. While he was waiting, the bell above the door rang and a group of clients came in. The receptionist greeted them with equal politeness. Welcome to the regal suit. Master Chen has been waiting for you for a long time. Please come this way. It was a sizable group. These people talking to each other disrupted the silence of the shop. Even if Bai Lang didn't want to listen, he couldn't help it. I didn't think I would be able to come here one day. If I tell my mom, she'll definitely be scared to death. What kind of antique suit shop is this? Does the company really want us to wear it? We have to look more proper at the award ceremony. Seeing how pitiful Brother Ming looks, we had better just endure it this time. Then what about my hair? I've shaved off one side. I don't think it will go with this kind of look. Haven't you heard of a wig before, dumbass? Ha ha ha, I'll definitely tug it off you in front of the camera. Among them there was one familiar face that Bai Lang couldn't help turning his head to look at. It turns out these were people that he had met before. Total Entertainment's male idol group are Red. They were also Bai Lang's colleagues. In this group there were 4 members, Yajia, Yadu, Yachi and Yalang. All 4 members were present. Our Red was known for their handsome looks and power dancing skills. They were a group that had established their fame in the idol circle. However, they followed a completely different path to the wrong Siki who had real skill. However, they were also one of the successful moneymakers of Total Entertainment currently, TN, them. So Chinese people often separate entertainers into 2 categories, idol and real skill. While not to say that the idols do not have any skill whatsoever, they are often the ones seen as to be selling their good looks and outside packaging, whereas the more established traditionally trained singers actors are part of the real skill group. In his previous life, just as with Rong Siki, Bai Lang hadn't had much contact with them. However, Bai Lang approximately knew why. When these 4 people looked at him, a strange expression appeared on their faces. Just as he expected, after an awkward momentary pause, one of the youth raised the corners of his mouth. He had apricot-shaped eyes, the left one of which had a small beauty mark underneath. He said, "Bai Lang." He didn't disguise the animosity in his tone. Chapter 18. Bai Lang had just been helping Qiu Ziohai wipe his mouth. He nodded his head. "Nice to meet you." The youth's dark pupils narrowed. His gaze flickered to Qiu Ziohai, then returned to Bai Lang. What a fortunate coincidence. Those headlines before were really big, huh? That was a nice performance from you. Beautifully done. So tell me, is it comfortable living in Building D, Floor 6? The youth said the address because he wanted to provoke Bai Lang. However, unfortunately he was off by 2 floors. Bai Lang didn't know whether to sigh over Kyujin's welfare or his regular pattern of treating people. He only said lightly, "The environment is not bad. It's a bit of a hassle getting in and out, but the view from the 6th floor isn't bad." The youth raised his eyebrow. "That's why I chose the middle room. The view is the best. The room was also renovated according to my requirements. Everything is painted black. Once it's paired with completely white furniture, the effect is quite thrilling. However, other people might not be able to get used to it." "The view is really very good," Bai Lang agreed. This kind of reply made the youth really feel as though he was being coldly patronized. He was even more incensed and said, "Oh, I forgot that it doesn't really matter which room, right? Because when that person gets excited, he can do it anywhere." Our Red's leader was Yadu. He was also the tallest one in the group. He grabbed the youth and jerked him back. "Let's go, Yachi. You should stop talking now." However, at this time Qiu Ziohai turned his head to look, asked Bai Lang, "Bai, don't we live on the 8th floor?" I counted. It shouldn't be wrong. When Yachi heard this, his face changed. Bai Lang rubbed Qiu Ziohai. He thought about whether or not to give this good boy another egg tart. This time Yachi was really angry. He pushed aside his friend and clenched his teeth and said viciously to Bai Lang, "Turns out you're mocking me, huh? Don't worry, I'm used to it. But do you really think that you're different? Don't be stupid. Think about whether or not he's ever appeared anywhere with you in public. When the newspapers started to talk, didn't he erase everything immediately? He gave you a house, a car and a bottomless credit card, raising you up openly. But he will never let you stand by his side. Because that place has already long ago been taken by someone else." Bai Lang listened to all of this with no expression on his face. However, in his heart he felt some surprise. He thought about the rumor he had heard from Total Entertainment previously. Turns out it wasn't just a rumor. In the rumor, Kyuchi and Anyachi previously had a connection. This word was very vague and there was no indication of whether or not it had been an exchange-type situation. However, a little while before he had also heard that someone had personally witnessed Yachi clutching Kyuchi-en in a crowded hallway where there were a lot of people walking about. The youth had clung onto him, forcibly asking, "Didn't you even have the slightest bit of real feelings?" Kyuchi-en had only disentangled himself and coldly kept walking. That gossiper who had been filled with mirth had added, "At least Yachi can be said to have gotten famous." However, he was still unsatisfied and doesn't know when to let go. How awkward. However, now that Bai Lang saw him in real life, he understood that Yachi probably had real feelings towards Kyuchi-en. Since he liked him, he directly opened his mouth to ask him. He had a direct gaze. He wasn't scared to love and he wasn't scared to hate. This was the kind of courage that only a young person would have. Thinking about it this way, this Yachi at least had a direct personality. He wasn't the kind of person to hide in the shadows to stab someone. However, it seemed that Kyuzayo-hai was startled by Yaki's sudden change in demeanor. He huddled closer and Bai Lang couldn't help but lower his head and hug him to comfort him. Do you think I'm lying to you? It's just that I can see clearly, that's all. I'm telling you out of the goodness of my heart to take his money and forget anything else. Otherwise it's just a waste of your time. Do you know why Kyuchien is always taking up with people from the entertainment circle and doesn't touch anyone else? Because there's someone inside his heart who also belongs to the circle. He is only looking for that person's shadow. Other the person, he will never. Hey, are you listening to me or not? Yaki's face moved furiously. Bai Lang only just raised his eyes when Kyuzayo-hai hurried to say, yes, listening. PFFT, this kid is really a treasure. Another member Yao Lang grinned. At the same time, Yao Lang also put his arms around Yachi with some force. He said, okay, that's enough. Mr. Bai has already received your good intentions. What are you getting upset about? Didn't you already say you want to wear your new clothes to find a new man? Let's go, our time is limited. After he spoke, he quickly turned around and added to Bai Lang, Mr. Bai, please don't mind him. When this kid is in a bad mood, his mouth is really ugly. But he'll get over it after a while. When that time comes, I'll bring him over to apologize to you. Yachi furiously struggled and said, let go of me, but the other three people forcibly suppressed him. Since the other people were willing to help him, it can be seen that the bond between the members of our Red was quite good. Bai Lang smiled vaguely. It's not necessary. Go ahead. The group leader Yadu once again apologized to Bai Lang, and this group finally entered one of the studio rooms, and finally the store returned to silence. Bai Lang rubbed the Kyuzayo-hai in his arms. Did you get scared? That older brother just got a bit excited, that's all. Kyuzayo-hai nodded his head and expressed he understood. But what was that older brother talking about? The person in Daddy's heart. Isn't it just me? Bai Lang could help bursting into laughter. Yes, of course it is. A few minutes later, Bai Lang saw Master Li Fu. Li Fu was approximately over 60 years of age. His hair was gray and his figure was thin. However, he stood very straight. When Li Fu saw Bai Lang, he straightaway smiled and complimented Bai Lang on his elegance and beauty. Because if order for clothes to be worn well, the bearing of the person wearing it was also important. He then waved at Kyuzayo-hai and then patted his head affectionately. He had always wanted to make clothes for children this age, but unfortunately by the time he finished, the clothing couldn't catch up with the growth of the child. His friendly and mellow attitude was not like that of an industry-famous master. After they chatted for a little while, Bai Lang also relaxed. He settled Kyuzayo-hai at the table to draw in a picture book he'd brought along and then started to his master Li Fu about his job. There was a tape measure hanging from Li Fu's neck as he smiled at Bai Lang and indicated that he wanted him to stand up. Actually, I'm not good with explaining, so let me help you make a suit. You watch from one side and if there's something you don't understand, just ask. Is that okay? Yes. Sorry to trouble the master. Of course, Bai Lang didn't have any objection. Li Fu took out his tape measure. Bai Lang cooperated by standing straight. He drew in his chin and stomach, but this made Li Fu laugh. My guess is that Mr. Bai has never had a custom suit before, right? A custom suit should fit the body and be comfortable. From measuring, design, pattern making to stitching, everything is done specially for you. It is a unique suit. In this world there won't be any other like it. It is made to fit your circumstances and your lifestyle. So you don't need to change yourself. Otherwise the suit won't fit well in the end. Bai Lang received the lesson. I understand. Li Fu didn't measure immediately, however. Instead he walked around Bai Lang several times. Then what kind of suit do you want? Bai Lang was aware there was many different types of suits, single button, double-breasted, all different types of collars and buckles. In his previous life he had a stylist who helped him choose his clothing. So right now when Bai was being asked this question he really had no clue. So Bai Lang instead thought about a scene from Outside Jade and Gold and said seriously, if there was a person that was once glorious but is now fallen on times, however he has to now go and see his old friends, then what kind of suit would master prepare for him? Li Fu was amused by this description. Young man, you don't need to be so honest. The costumes for the movie will be otherwise provided. This suit is a gift for you. When Li Fu said this, Bai Lang knew that he also knew the story for the script. So asked, I'm also trying to do some research. Master will know these wealthy people better than me. In their opinion, what type is the best? Other than material and style, is there anything else that they would take into consideration? Bai Lang's question was actually about the inner turmoil of the main character in Gold. It was the kind of question that he should not have asked Li Fu but instead the director. However, when Li Fu heard it, he did indeed have some experiences to share. If you are talking about those people who were really born with a golden spoon in their mouths, they're really different from us. Even if their bodies are covered in mud, they would still think themselves majestic. This type of arrogance and loftiness is something that was ingrained into their bones, bit by bit, from childhood. It has nothing to do with what they are wearing, because to them, their flesh and blood is already different from others. By the same token, people like us, even if we earn a lot of money, in the eyes of some people we are just a servant that kneels on the floor to help them make their clothes. Even if we became the richest man in the nation, that fact wouldn't change. Li Fu's smile expressed a lot of emotions. Every man in his heart has a definition of what is master and what is servant. So to answer your question, that person that you speak of would wear his most ordinary clothes to meet his friends. In his heart, he probably still thinks he is the king of this world. Within the space of a few sentences, the role sprang to life in Bai Lang's mind. He was wretched but tenacious, generous but also cruel. He had a conflicting personality. Many images appeared in Bai Lang's mind. Thank you, Master, for your guidance. I haven't started teaching anything yet. Li Fu smiled and waved his hand. Since your entire mind is fixated on the movie, then let's make you a suit that a tailor would often wear to work. A suit maker's work uniform was obviously still a suit. Right now Li Fu was wearing a striped suit with a matching vest and shirt. He looked very spirited and stylish. Bai Lang agreed. I like the Master's suit type. It's conservative and simple, but still has a uniqueness about it. How rare for a young person to think this way. It was Li Fu's turn to have his eyes light up. They usually think that a suit is traditional, stuffy and unchangeable. But they don't know that it is even more eye-catching than any other type of clothing. Just like what you're wearing now. The matching is not bad. However, your pants are too wide and the shoulders are also not suited to your body. Li Fu's interest rose and he walked around a few more times and also asked Bai Lang to walk and sit. He repeated this a while until he was satisfied. Okay, I approximately understand it. What Bai Lang didn't know was that when Li Fu finished the suit, he sent a large box full of accessories as well. It was enough to fill an entire closet. According to Li Fu, he had not met such a suitable client for a long time. When he was free, he would make a few patterns and then give it to his pupils to practice their craft. At this moment, Bai Lang was busily trying to commit to memory the details of the measuring up procedure that Li Fu shown him. Thus, when he came home, Bai Lang also brought with him a tape measure. In order to make sure he wouldn't forget, that night Bai Lang dragged Kyuzayo-hai to measure up. However, Kyuzayo-hai wasn't a cooperative model. He kept fidgeting and was also very scared of being tickled. He played around for a while until Bai Lang finally gave up. Later in the evening, Kyu-chien came back. After Kyuzayo-hai had gone to bed, Bai Lang took out the tape measure again and indicated that he wanted Kyu-chien to be the model for a while. But Kyu-chien was also not a cooperative model. He wasn't fidgety, but he got excited very easily. Particularly when Bai Lang was kneeling in front of him to measure his calf. Kyu-chien reached out and grasped Bai Lang's chin. He used his thumb to rub against Bai Lang's lips. This kind of angle, paired with Kyujin's smile, made what he wanted very clear. However, Kyujin's amorous expression made Bai Lang suddenly think about the things he had heard today. Bai Lang couldn't help freezing slightly. He then lowered his eyes and mechanically reached for the zipper in Kyujin's pants. His movements weren't natural. Kyu-chien reached out to block his movement. Don't like it. Not used to it. Bai Lang didn't raise his eyes. He replied in a toneless voice. Kyu-chien grabbed Bai Lang and pulled him up. He looked at him in a measuring manner. Have I ever forced you? No, Bai Lang sighed. He had to admit that Kyu-chien was a generous lover. Kyu-chien narrowed his eyes. Then what's the matter? Bai Lang felt helpless. Even he didn't really know what it was. Because according to Bai Lang's plans, he shouldn't have any expectations. In order to make it up to Kyu-chien, Bai Lang proactively kissed him. Can we do it normally? Kyu-chien was unappeased. He held Bai Lang and carefully looked into his eyes. Bai Lang had to force himself not to look away. It was unknown what Kyu-chien saw. He also didn't ask any more. Instead, he suddenly pushed Bai Lang towards the wall and suddenly kneeled down himself. With his hands he fixed Bai Lang in place. Bai Lang froze. In a split second he understood what Kyu-chien wanted to do. He hurried to say, "That's not what I meant." You don't want to say. Qiu Qian pressed close to his target. He raised his eyes. So I can only use my actions. Bai Lang also lost the ability to say anything. Afterwards the feelings were too intense and made his entire head muddled. Later that night, Qiu Qian watched the Bai Lang who had fallen unconscious. The deeply sleeping Bai Lang still had some wetness at the corner of his eyes. It was probably from overstimulation before. Qiu Qian used his finger to wipe it. Then he picked up his phone and called Hong Hong. Who did Bai Lang see today? Yaoqi. Qiu Jin's gaze moved over to the watch sitting on the bedside table. Get the recording file out. I want to listen. Yes. It was clear that the Hong Hong on the other end of the line didn't approve. However, Qiu Qian directly hung up the phone and lay down beside Bai Lang. He wasn't guilty about using these kind of covert surveillance tactics, especially since he was, little by little, letting Bai Lang enter into his world. Chapter 19. In the coming days, Bai Lang spent half of his time at the Regal Suit learning tailoring with Li Fu. Actually, most of this time was spent helping Li Fu receive his clients. Of course, Bai Lang had to disguise himself slightly. Luckily, most of the clients would never have expected a star from the television screen to be running about here, so they only commented that he looked like Bai Lang and didn't think anything else. At this time outside, Gold and Jade's female lead and other roles were also cast out. The situation was just as Fang Hua said. Because this film didn't have many resources, so the popularity of the people they found was only ordinary. The actress was a female lead was called Shen Eru. The supporting male role was Luo Feng. Both weren't names that Bai Lang was familiar with from the next 10 years. Only the old actor that was playing the villain was someone that Bai Lang knew would win the Gold Emperor Award for Best Supporting Actor in a few years. With the addition of him who was an actor without any movie experience, then Gold was just as some poisonous industry people said, just a rich second-generation's movie dream. After all, the investor was a textile company boss and the director was his friend. Even so, Bai Lang trusted that Zhu Quan definitely had his own ideas, and among them was definitely not wasting the money his friend had entrusted to him. Everything would become clear when shooting started in the next month. Right now all he had to do was do his best to prepare himself. Of course, this included trying to find the funds that the movie would need in the future. These days Fang Hua had helped him to contact Total Entertainment's overseas copyright department and already received an answer. However, according to their valuation, this author was someone that had never had any previous works, and also the Western fantasy background of the book was probably not something most Chinese people could accept. So they rejected Bai Lang's proposal to purchase together. Bai Lang didn't force them. In any case, this way the book's rights would fully belong to him and he could get a better price when it came to reselling it. So Bai Lang proposed to pay off the cost in one go, and the overseas copyright department would be his mediator with G country. The time limit for negotiation was within 2 weeks, as the first book was already on the market, and Bai Lang guessed that if things didn't get settled within 1 month, then they would miss the chance. Since their time was limited, the copyright department was not able to settle the price at below 1.5 million and finally settled on 2.3 million. As for the extra 800,000, Bai Lang struggled for a while, then finally made up his mind and went to the bank to get an information pack on applying for a loan. Bai Lang guessed that based on his small fame as well as the reasonable amount of money currently in his bank account, he could approximately make the cut for this kind of small medium-sized loan. However, the only difficulty was that he needed to provide some kind of collateral for security. However, right now Bai Lang didn't have a car or a house. He was also too embarrassed to ask Qiu Qian to be his guarantor, since this would be bothering him too much. As for repayments, there was still quite a few jobs whose payments hadn't entered his accounts yet. Perhaps he should ask Sister Fang to arrange some more jobs for him. It's just that in the same evening that Bai Lang came home from the bank, Qiu Qian pressed him down and licked his ear and said huskily, "If you borrow 800,000 from the bank, then tomorrow I'll go to the bank to pay it back. If you have to owe money, you should owe me." Bai Lang sighed. You have too much free time, enough free time to investigate what he was doing at the bank. Qiu Qian lightly bit his earlobe. If I don't watch you closely, what should I do if you run away? Bai Lang paused for a second, then said, "It's a buyout, so where would I go?" Qiu Qian met Bai Lang's gaze, frowning. "If it's a buyout, then does it really all belong to me?" Bai Lang looked at Qiu Qian expressionlessly. "When you find the next one, then be firm and get rid of me, ba?" Qiu Qian heard this and a light flashed in his eyes. But what he said was, "You're not as clingy as some others." Bai Lang lowered his eyes. He answered, "No," but his next words were blocked by Qiu Jin's lips and his tongue, which entered his mouth. It was not until Bai Lang's breathing became difficult that Qiu Qian slowly let go. He said in a hoarse voice, fine. But until that day, you have to be good. Bai Lang vaguely felt that the second sentence was somewhat unnecessary. However, he didn't have time to think about it because Qiu Jin's evil mouth once again stole away all his thinking. After the measuring incident before, Qiu Qian now loved to explore every inch of his body. Perhaps the previous ways made Qiu Qian feel bored, so Bai Lang could only work hard to accustome himself to this change that was both embarrassing and stimulating. A week later, with Qiu Jin's help, the Chinese copyright for that series of books, including its options for movie or TV, was purchased by Bai Lang. The set of books had only been on the shelves of G City for 3 weeks, and it was just about to enter a period of furious sales. So all Bai Lang needed to do was to now patiently wait for a buyer. The time was the beginning of December. In January of the next year, Gold would start filming. Fang Hua had also helped Bai Lang accept a few advertisements that had a young and healthy image. Following on from partners, it was a good way to increase Bai Lang's exposure on the screens. At this time, Bai Lang can be said to have officially gone down a different path to his previous life. He successfully graduated from partners with both his fame and reputation intact, and audiences deeply remembered him as being a healthy, warm and friendly newcomer. The company had also used this opportunity to organize a meet and greet event for Bai Lang. This was something that had never happened in his previous life. However, this made Bai Lang very busy for some time. Because this type of meet and greet was scheduled in most major cities, you couldn't pick and choose too much. So Qiu Zhaohai began to complain that now the person that was always away working changed from daddy to abai. If there wasn't abai, then there wasn't yummy food to eat. Qiu Zhaohai definitely understood the importance of this connection. Since it was the end of the year, other than work, there was also a lot of events planned for end-of-year parties. In the last few years, the end-of-year parties of many large enterprises would ask entertainers to come and perform in order to reward their employees for their hard work that year. Thus, at this time of the year, artists such as singers, comedians and hosts had profitable jobs. Bai Lang was an actor, so he was not in these categories. It was rare for an actor to be invited. However, for partner companies' end-of parties, such as Uni, Bai Lang would still appear to support them. Even though he wouldn't go to the stage to perform and there wasn't much chance of getting any exposure. However, since their companies had a professional relationship, it was good to accept the invitation and go to the party to show his face. This can also be considered a public relations service for Bai Lang, and so if he participated in some other company's end-of-year party, of course he couldn't reject to go to his own. Thus this year Total Entertainment's party was especially grand. The main reason was to celebrate the movie Emperor Su Quan, who had actually been signed on for many years but had just finished his overseas activities and returned back to China to progress his career. Speaking of Su Quan, he was 33 years old this year and he was already a veteran actor of 15 years. He was also the box office superstar of the last few years with both acting ability and looks. He was still young and his future was extremely bright. The year before, Su Quan had been in a masterpiece blockbuster in F country called Gorgeous. He had also received numerous movie awards, big and small, domestically. As for the Golden Emperor Award for Best Male Actor, Su Quan had won it long ago before changing directions to work overseas. However, what his fans liked the most was probably Su Quan's looks. When he was young, his features were already exceptional. As he grew more mature, he only gained more of a seductive quality. All his fans said that as long as Su Quan looked at you once in the eye, his imposing power and aura would make you feel as though you were being swallowed by a storm. Even more rare was Su Quan's acting ability was enough to surmount his looks. He made people feel that the role he played should look this way. There wasn't any abnormal feelings. In his previous life, Bai Lang hadn't watched many of Su Quan's movies. This was because Ju Quan had told him that Su Quan's acting method was predicated on his looks. Even if you looked for a long time, you wouldn't be able to learn the same method, and so he told Bai Lang not waste his time. Bai Lang was not sure if these words were meant to be compliment or not. Someone as famous as Su Quan usually would have long ago founded their own independent management company in order to have more freedom in their career. However, some years ago Su Quan had unexpectedly signed on to Total Entertainment. It really made many industry insiders question if they were seeing things correctly. However, this decision was afterwards thought by others to be actually quite intelligent. After all, Total Entertainment had given Su Quan total control of his own brand and at the same time backed him up with strong corporate power. So when Su Quan went overseas to progress his career, he didn't encounter many problems. Now that Su Quan had returned to the country, it was not just to accept the role as the protagonist in the historical masterpiece Emperor Feng. But he also expressed through his manager that he was no longer interested in filming big blockbusters with a lot of special effects. He wanted to do more roles that involved strong characterization and deep emotions. Hence he had returned to China. Due to the huge sales and success of Gorgeous, no one could comment that he had only returned to China because he hadn't done well overseas. However, what made Bai Lang puzzled was that in his past life he didn't remember Su Quan ever announcing his return to China. According to Bai Lang's impression at the time of his death, other than accepting the occasional big movie in China, Su Quan had stayed overseas. Or was it only that he had been too caught up in his own misfortunes that he had overlooked this piece of news? Bai Lang saw the huge posters of Su Quan hanging around the entire venue and felt that the events from his previous life were more and more distant. Behind Total Entertainment's most grand ever end-of-year party was key to family's support in letting them use their club and hotel. This day, the entire hotel was taken over by Total Entertainment. Other than the glittering gold grand banquet hall, if any of the guests drank too much and couldn't go home, no matter who they were, they could obtain the key to a deluxe room for free. There were about 40 to 50 artists signed to Total Entertainment. With the addition of the staff members from the business, advertising, public relations, technical, film and television and other administrative general affairs, there were about 300 to 400 employees in the company. This type of spending was really very extreme. Of course, this was also a good time to do promotion. The grand lobby of the hotel had today been decorated as though it was a red carpet runway. A long red carpet as well as various interview stations have made it easy for the media to come to do interviews. The champagne flowed and the lights flashed non-stop. Some well-informed fans also had managed to find their way to the hotel and were fighting to a glimpse of their favorite stars descending from their cars. And so when the young film emperor Su Quan's figure appeared, the entire venue's excitement reached breaking point. People were clapping and screaming non-stop. The popularity of Su Quan could be easily seen from this night. However, at the time that this happened, Bai Lang was already inside. He was sitting beside Rong Siki and eating peanuts, waiting for the party to start. Fang Hua had taken care of them well. She had arranged for them to arrive early in the order of appearances. This way they could grab the media's attention and not be affected by Su Quan. Just then, when the two of them had come in, they had also received the appropriate amount of interest and interviews. As for the events inside, it wasn't open to the media at all. Whether it was an artist or an ordinary employee, everyone had their own seats. They could all enjoy a delicious feast and have a good time. Thus, when Su Quan entered the premises, it was almost time for the party to start. As per the normal schedule of events for a company's end-of-year party, of course the boss's speech could not be missed. Bai Lang didn't know when Qiu Qian had arrived at the venue. He only knew when he saw the other person. He was already standing on the stage. He spoke some short words of gratitude before heading off again. Bai Lang couldn't help looking at where Qiu Qian was sitting a few more times. Sitting on Qiu Jin's table was all the high-level management of the company. The only artist was Su Quan. He was sitting right next to Qiu Qian. So when the meal had reached its middle course, a voice suddenly spoke up near Bai Lang. "Look at the person sitting by his side and then think about what I told you." Bai Lang turned around and only saw Yaki's back after the other person threw down his words and left. Chapter 20. After the end of the luxurious banquet, the guests were all ushered into the adjacent reception hall by the hotel staff. Here there was a large dance floor, couches, as well as several bars. The lighting was low, and with the addition of the DJ playing sometimes slow and sometimes fast music, the entire atmosphere turned into that of a club. A few young people were delighted by this. They immediately threw off the previous formality, which was rather like being at a wedding, and ran to the dance floor to bump and grind. This was an entertainment company's party after all. Most of the employees had outgoing and lively personalities that were always up for a challenge. Since the company had organized such a good party, then it would be remiss if they didn't have a great time. Thus the entire venue's atmosphere became very high. The red, purple, blue and green electronic lights flashed and the DJ's music also became faster and more frenetic. The bass was strong and the beat of the music made people's eardrums as well as the floor thump. There was more and more people crowded onto the dance floor. Other than the employees, there were also quite few artists that couldn't control their instincts and decided to throw their images to the wind for this night. Bai Lang didn't join in this fun. He thought he was already someone who was over 30 years old in his heart, so this kind of frenetic activity only made him feel tired. Very early on he sat on a couch and found a comfortable position. He ordered a glass of juice and watched the lively dance floor. As for Rong Siki, this real young person, he sat next to Bai Lang like a wallflower. After Bai Lang asked him curiously why he didn't go and join the fun, Rong Siki bluntly replied that he might fall over, and so Bai Lang couldn't ask any more. However, the two of them were both people of note. After Uni's advertisement filled the streets, The two people became two of the most admired stars in the company. Many artists wanted to get to know them and so of course wouldn't miss this opportunity. So after they sat down, Bai Lang and Rong Siki were constantly visited by colleagues wanting to say hello, and so they also weren't bored. The same type of scene could be seen on the other side of the hall. And this one was much bigger. The film emperor Su Quan and Total Entertainment's big boss Qiu Qian were casually sitting. Every now and then they would exchange a few sentences and careful observers could immediately sniff out the fact that these two probably were old acquaintances. Otherwise, since after joining Total Entertainment, Su Quan had spent most of his time overseas, how could he have gotten to know the boss so well? And Su Quan, who usually disdained talking to the public about his personal life, was in an unusually good mood this night. When people asked him about his life overseas, he also didn't mind responding a few sentences. Of course, people only dared to ask him polite type questions, after all, even if they were high-level management, when they were stared at by Su Quan's deep, magnetic eyes and received his half-smile, they all felt like their heads were swimming. The only person that seemed unaffected was the big boss Qiu Qian. As usual, he was still wearing a flower print shirt over which he wore a black suit. A few buttons which hadn't been buttoned up showed his wheat-colored tanned skin and the gold chain on his neck. He leaned back lazily on his seat next to the exceptionally handsome film emperor. However, his sensual charisma didn't lose to Su Quan when catching the eye. When Qiu Qian sat down, he had ordered a martini, listened to the chatter around him and gazed lazily at the dance floor. It looked extremely casual, but only Qiu Qian knew that from this angle he could see in a direct line to the corner where Bai Lang was sitting. Although it was far away, however, there was nothing blocking his vision. At this time, Qiu Qian could also see Yachi stopping to talk to Bai Lang. At the same time he spoke, he also looked over at him. Qiu Qian narrowed his eyes. His expression didn't flicker when he saw Bai Lang also following Yachi to glance over this way. However, very quickly he looked away again. Afterwards he said something which made Yachi leave in a huff. Qiu Qian gazed darkly at Yachi's leaving back for a few seconds before he looked back at Bai Lang. He could approximately guess what Yachi had just said to Bai Lang. After all, Qiu Qian had heard the entire recording of everything that had transpired at the regal suit. And so, after hearing this, what would Bai Lang's reaction be? Qiu Qian slowly sipped his drink and decided to wait. Just like how earlier today Qiu Qian had been waiting for Bai Lang to open his mouth. To ask him, since the two of them were both going to the same party, if there needed to be some kind of other arrangement. However, no matter how long he waited, Qiu Qian didn't hear this question. Right now he decided to give Bai Lang another chance. However, at this time a voice spoke next to his ear, interrupting his thoughts. Are you bored? Want to go somewhere? Qiu Jin's gaze moved and saw that Su Quan, who was sitting next to him, had finished his conversation. In his hand he was also turning a martini glass. As it tinkled lightly, on his mouth there was a relaxed smile. As for the people he had been talking to, they all seemed to have received Su Quan's signal that their conversation was at an end. They immediately busied themselves doing their own things and talking amongst themselves, leaving them alone. Do you need me to remind you that in this kind of event, the understanding boss is the one that leaves first? Su Quan raised the corner of his beautiful lips and his eyes were bright like shining stars in a sea of darkness. Qiu Qian was already very familiar with this appearance. He only paused then nodded. Fine. Should I take you home first? Su Quan shook his head. Since it's a rare opportunity, let's go to the Blue Parrot. Qiu Qian agreed. He downed everything in his glass in one smooth motion and at the same time his gaze once again returned to that corner. Very good. Bai Lang was still talking to Rong Siki. Qiu Qian made a low HMPH sound then put his glass down. He stood up decisively then jerked his head. Let's go. Su Quan smiled. He followed suit to put down his glass and got up gracefully. Qiu Qian an offhand farewell to the people around him and then strode towards the front door of the large hall. The most important people inside the venue were on the move. Naturally, everyone's attention was roused. Qiu Qian was a boss that usually liked to have a good time. He wasn't conservative at all. Thus, a few employees immediately rushed over to try and ask him to stay. They said things like, "Boss, how come you're leaving? Stay a bit longer. We still haven't had time to get you drunk yet." And similar types of jokes. Qiu Qian waved his hand. He told them to have a good time and his footsteps didn't stop. Su Quan followed behind him, elegantly smiling. However, at this time there was a sudden flash of light, aimed directly at these two people. It was a white light, clearly from a mobile phone's flash camera. Qiu Qian and Su Quan's movements suddenly stopped, and the people next to them began to sweat. Because most people knew that what Su Quan hated the most was being followed and having his photo taken. Thus he didn't even accept interviews often. The reporters and paparazzi who followed him all afterwards inexplicably had some kind of ugly scandal or other such problems. Afterwards people understood that unless they had strong power, they couldn't go after Su Quan. Behind him was some high person taking care of him. As for this end-of-year party, there wasn't any outsiders. There weren't any paparazzi and everybody was relaxed having a good time. So thus the person who took the photo could only be an employee. However, this type of act was also forbidden. It was a young girl holding her phone who had taken the candid shot. Just then she had been so excited she had lost her head. After the flash appeared, the atmosphere around her changed immediately and many eyes turned towards her. She immediately realized her mistake. Her face went from green to white. Oh, I. Su Quan's lip turned up. He put his hand over Kyujin's shoulder and his magnetic eyes were fixed on the person with the camera. Delete the one you took just now and take it again. I prefer to be prepared before taking a photo. Su Quan's voice was neither fast nor slow, and his mesmerizing smile made the young girl stammer. Oh, okay, I've deleted it. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Su Quan pressed closer to Kyujin. Other than his hand on his shoulder, he also tilted his head a little bit towards Kyujin. Okay. It's a rare opportunity, so help me and Achian take a photo together. The young woman's mouth opened and closed. She looked as though she wanted to refuse, however she was stared at Su Quan and eventually, still shaking violently, she took a few photos. Before he left, Su Quan kindly added a few sentences. Later I'll ask my assistant to come ask you for a copy. Don't delete it too quick. The young woman looked as though she was about to cry. Oh, okay. Because in her phone the photos were all blurry and beyond recognition. However, she was too scared to ask him to retake it. Also, because of this small disturbance, all the people in Total Entertainment came to know two things. Number 1, Su Quan was just as difficult to bother as the rumors. They needed to take care. Number 2, Su Quan was familiar enough with their boss to call him Achien. Bai Lang saw this too and felt as though he could see from the very beginning to very end. Half an hour later, gentle jazz flowed through a dimly lit space. The blue light made the stylishly decorated private booth gave a somewhat romantic feeling. This was the feature of the Blue Parrot Bar. Everything was related to blue. Kyujin and Su Quan left the end-of-year party and as Su Quan proposed, they came here to have a drink. This was a bar that where only members were allowed to enter. It had the highest privacy and protection from being disturbed. It was the place many wealthy and powerful people chose to relax and pass their free time. At this time Kyujin again ordered a glass of ice martini. Su Quan had changed to a lime vodka. In his half-hidden private booth, their conversation naturally flowed more freely. This time you left and came back to China in a rush. Did you settle everything properly? Su Quan sat on the soft couch. His hand was under his chin as he asked this question casually. Just about. Kyujin stirred the ice in his cup. Still don't want to tell me the details? Is it to do with the Kyu family? Even if I told you, you wouldn't understand. Kyujin glanced at Su Quan. You've left Zindao for so many years. Who else do you still remember? Su Quan smiled. It's the place that I grew up in. I won't forget it that easily. Kyujin drank from his glass. How come you want to come back to China so suddenly? Why are you asking it like that? Sounds like I'm not welcome, Su Quan joked. I wouldn't dare. Kyujin didn't follow him to joke. As long as nothing happened, then that's good. A warm expression appeared on Su Quan's face. It's not what you think. I'm fine. It's only that I wanted to come back, so I did. Kyujin looked at Su Quan then said, if you need help, just speak. After all, you're a person from the company. Su Quan's beautiful eyes curved. He changed the subject. How is she? How high? How old is he now? 5. Extremely noisy. It was Kyujin's turn to smile. Last time I saw him, he was still a tiny little thing. Time flies so quick. That's right. Kids grow up in the blink of an eye. Kyujin's eyes crinkled. He looked like a doting father. Su Quan gazed at him with a surprised expression. However, what he didn't know was that right now Kyujin was thinking about what they overheard a few minutes ago. Just then, when Su Quan had gone to the bathroom to wash up, Kyujin had taken out the earphones from his bag. This type of action, which had been labeled by Hong Hong as perverted, was something Kyujin was becoming more and more interested in recently. From inside his ear. Abaya, you're back. Hug hug. There was the sound of rustling clothes. It's so late. How come you're not asleep yet? Then there was the sound of a kiss. I'm waiting for Abaya and Daddy to come home. Time, don't wait up. Otherwise you won't be able to get up in the morning again. But even if I lie in bed I can't sleep on, Kyuzayo-hai replied in a milky, childish voice. Where's Daddy? Bai Lang paused a few seconds and said. Your dad has some things to do so isn't coming back. Let's sleep first. Oh. Then today Abai can sleep with me, right? Okay. Go and lie down on the bed. I'm going to take a shower first. On. I will take off my clothes and wait for you. Oh. Wait, why are you taking your clothes off? When you and Daddy sleep you're both naked. I also want to sleep naked with you. After a moment's pause, Bai Lang said in a helpless voice. Who said? I saw it, Daddy sleeping with Abai. Daddy said I wasn't to wake you up so I was very quiet. Thank you. Let's keep this as our little secret, okay? On. I won't tell Daddy that I also slept naked with you. No, that's not it. I mean, what you saw, me and your dad, we were just hot. But I told Ozan, what should I do? Tomorrow, let's take some little rabbit buns and go to his house to play. Qiuqian heard Bai Lang's completely helpless voice and could totally imagine the expression on his face. Suddenly, Qiuqian downed his entire glass. He said in a good mood, time to go home and sleep. Let's go. Su Quan went still. His heart really felt shocked. He could tell that there was definitely something that had made Qiuqian change.